if we have a court system in Washington, D.C. that you're going to get a different ruling on than if you're in Phoenix, AZ, and it's still a federal court, right? But it's different rulings, then we have a two-tier justice system.
Do you guys feel like you had a fair representation? The prosecutors were actually giving a fair representation. Now, I understand the prosecutors are going to try to, convince the jury that you are guilty. That's their job, so that does make sense. But do you feel like it was a dishonest portrayal, or do you think that it was something that you could say, no, there were times where they were saying things and I can understand their perspective, but I disagree with it?
No, they were outside the lines. They were suborning perjury. They were coaching lying on the stand. They were withholding what they call Brady material, exculpatory evidence.
And one more thing, do you think the judges were also biased beforehand?
Yes,
absolutely.
Absolutely. Now, I actually want to comment on that, okay? Because the government fought tooth and nail to get these cases tried in D.C., okay? They did not want to go anywhere else because they knew, and if I'm not mistaken, they even said as much to Enrique Tarrio, that they knew that they'd get laughed out of court if they went anywhere else but D.C., right? So if we have a court system in Washington, D.C. that you're going to get a different ruling on than if you're in Phoenix, AZ, and it's still a federal court, right? But it's different rulings, then we have a two-tier justice system. We, as January 6ers, were over-prosecuted. There's something called prosecutorial discretion, okay? Now, prosecutors chose to go after us with all of their might. They chose to go after us the way they should have gone after Joe Biden's son, right? The way they should have gone after Hunter Biden. You see, but they used their prosecutorial discretion to over-prosecute us and under-prosecute BLM and Antifa, which, by the way, over 200 days worth of riots and 95 to 98% of the charges, federal charges on Antifa and BLM, dropped.
Yeah.
I was at the wrong rallies, obviously.
If you've been to the White House when they drove President Trump under the bunker in June. Yeah,
we talk about that a lot. The May 29th insurrection at the White House, because of the fact that the media did treat that as if it was just people getting a little too rambunctious
peaceful,
or whatever.
Mostly peaceful.
But if that, I think everyone around the table here and pretty much all of our viewers would agree that, if that were to have been Joe Biden or Barack Obama, all of the people at the White House would have been wrapped up. And it's possible that Secret Service would have gone kinetic on them,
Absolutely. And don't forget, the pro-Palestinian Hamas people stormed the Capitol just the other day, thanks to Rashida Tlaib, right? Wasn't that last year?
Into the Capitol? Did they actually?
Into the Capitol building, into the dome area. Yeah. They were in there unlawfully, from what I understand.
Well, I think the most egregious time that happened was during the Kavanaugh hearings. People came into the Capitol and the Supreme Court, and they were greeted by AOC and Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, I mean,
then they post their fundraiser. Like that's wild.
This kind of stuff is part of why so many people in the U.S., I think, actually look at the situation when it comes to January 6th, and they say, "Well, wait a minute." Right, like, so it's bad the guys that were fighting the cops, right? We can agree that that's bad, and this is just a genuine sense. I'm not trying to make an argument for that or against that, but I feel like the genuine sense is it was bad the people that fought the cops, but there were so many people that were arrested, and there were so many people that got such extensive sentences, and yet at the same time you had people that were outside of Supreme Court justices' houses, and there was a guy that was
against the
law.
Yeah,
against the law,
right?
But there's a
guy that was threatening to kill one of the Supreme Court. I think it was Kavanaugh, but it might have been Alito. I'm not sure. Either way, it doesn't matter. The point is, someone was actually threatening to kill them, and they were actually on site at their residence. Just like you guys have mentioned, the January or 2020, the summer of love, the whole riots across the country, and you hear that the vice president was promoting a bail fund for the rioters, and I also think that that's part of why January 6th happened. There had been a whole year of riots.
Oh, yeah.
And you saw the way the government had treated those people, and it had been kid gloves the entire time. An FBI federal building in Portland, or it was Portland,
Colorado, I think. Is it was Portland. The courthouse?
It's courthouse in Portland, Oregon.
Portland? Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Portland, Oregon, that was under siege for at least 100 days, possibly longer. Yeah. Every night, the riot police were out there, defending the the Fed's building. And so when you go to DC thinking that it's going to be a peaceful protest, and the vast majority of people were, it makes sense that the American people are kind of like, wait a minute here, hold on, unless you're the most partisan person, imaginable, you're going to kind of have that sense. Do you guys have, I assume you have the same sense,
Look, I just have to say this. 2020, all of 2020 and the Hunter Biden laptop suppression, along with the rigged election, along with January 6th, all of these things are the hallmarks of regime change.
It was a coup.
Our government, the CIA, our government has become expert level at regime change. What we have to do is recognize all the hallmarks or all the signs of regime change, right? Most of the time, regime changes happen when there's a death of a monarch or an election. Okay. So what we saw in 2020 was a globalist, Chinese, radical Islam, like all of these communist, fascism, Satanism, Luciferian, they all got together pretty much and agreed that they were going to try to destroy America. And if you look into Yuri Bezmenov and his talk about the ideological subversion campaign of the Soviet Union, psychological warfare, demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and normalization, then what you're seeing when you look at January 6th in context of the last several decades is that these people that have been trying to destroy our country for decades finally got in office. At least that's what January 6th and all that stuff was all about.
And I consider it just a really crappy afternoon,
Fair enough.
But you're right, absolutely.
So, actually, why don't you elaborate a little bit on what your sense of the situation was, Jay?
Well,
when you went there, what were you thinking when you were going there, and what were you thinking like when you were actually there? What was your intent on being there?
My intent on being there was to basically stand up for people that couldn't be there, and myself included, to support, pushback against a lot of the left's where we were headed politically in our country. The ridiculous things that were being instituted in schools, the indoctrination, the trans movement, not to say that I'm against trans people or anything like that. It's just that it doesn't really have a place in a forefront in our society, and to be celebrated as much as it was kind of shoved down our throats. And that type of thing just didn't seem to make sense to me. And when I was there, I was quite surprised at the group that people that made up that group. It was a lot of, as I said, like grandmas and older people, and there was kids. And someone pointed out the other day there was a bunch of dogs there. This is not a crowd,
right?
Yeah, truly. And it's not a crowd that showed up to do battle, to usurp the government or overthrow anything. And the amounts of the tear gas that was shot into the crowd, and the rubber bullets, which I didn't experience any of the rubber bullets, but the tear gas certainly, that was pretty intense stuff. That you're just a group standing there. It was kind of a boring event. I've said many times it was not like the news characterized it, or how you would experience it watching it at home live. It was they were cutting from one action moment to the next, sure. And it just seemed like a wall of violence, and it certainly wasn't that.
Right.
I'd never been to a protest before, and I had no idea what was going to happen. So I was kind of surprised when I started seeing people in younger guys in military stuff, garb, pulling weapons and stuff out of their backpacks. And I thought, well, this is kind of weird. I thought this was just a protest that would be, certainly peaceful. And they started, yelling at the police and this and that. And later on, I figured that was what they meant by agent provocateurs and the presence of the FBI's assets and CHSs and confidential human sources and that type of thing. And when I heard about that, it felt like there was a lot of that there, because it was very odd. Like out of nowhere, people would just, start stuff with the police. And then I also saw the police being very starting stuff themselves. Like when people would turn around, they'd hit them with a club, or just be very aggressive out of with little provocation. And it became very very confusing as to why these pockets of violence were erupting and what people were planning on doing with that. So when I got caught up in it, I didn't feel threatened at all because the group was, for the most part, peaceful, and it started, getting a little bit rowdy, and I thought, well, this is ridiculous. Like, there's no reason for this. And then a crowd push came, and I got caught in that. But I ran like a sissy away from that because I wanted no part of it. Yeah, there's no point, So it was a real education in the way that the media can take an event and totally change it towards their narrative. And people remarked to me that I feared for my family when I was watching that, and our way of life was threatened. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" That's,
It was a manipulated event.
PSYOP.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.